Thank you very much.
Speaker,
Honourable Nanaia Mahuta.
it gives me great pleasure to be able to contribute to the second reading of the Tauihu Claims Settlement Bill and recognise the huge amount of effort and commitment that has gone into reaching this point by all those negotiators and advisors, all those people who have participated throughout the whole process to ensure that what we have here today is a cluster of settlements tasked with taking the people in Te Tauihu forward. I want to also make an acknowledgement to my friend and colleague Marion Street, who was at those same Waitangi Day celebrations at the marae that the Honourable Nick Smith referred to. And one of the things in our conversation that she said to me was that it was a brilliant day because everybody from the whole community came onto the marae and had a place where they all felt like they belonged. And isn't that a great testament to the progress that treaty settlements can make for all New Zealanders in terms of shaping our national identity within communities throughout New Zealand? And that is what Te Tauihu and the group of hapu iwi in those claims groups are able to achieve. Mr Speaker, when we went down to Nelson to listen to the submissions, we understood how acute some of the local issues are for those iwi. We understood that despite some of the tense points of negotiation, some of the internal factions that occurred, it had taken place over a long period of time. And so for anyone listening to this debate today, they should have the confidence that this hasn't happened all of a sudden. It's happened because there has been a lot of work and effort put into reconciling issues within each respective iwi and trying to progress a settlement for the greater interests of those iwi members. Mr Speaker, one of the things that always vexed the Māori Affairs Select Committee is the issue of mandate. So I thought it would be useful to actually go through the ratification of the deeds of settlements of each respective iwi of the Tauihu claim so that people can see that the rate of participation and the level of confirmation of deeds of settlement were quite healthy, and we should be encouraged by that. Ngāti Tamaki Te Tauihu had a 40% participation rate in the ratification of their deed of settlement and an approval rate of 100%, and they had very few invalid votes. Ngāti Rārua had a 28% participation rate and 99% approval rate. Ngāti Koata had 25% participation rate of their tribal members in ratifying their deed and a 98% approval rate. Te Atiawa o Te Waka Maui, a 28% participation rate and a 92% approval rate. Ngāti Toa Rangatira had a 26.2% participation rate and a 98.7% approval rate. Tangitane o Wairau, 34% participation rate, 98% approval rate. Ngāti Kuia, 34% participation rate and a 99% approval rate. Ngāti Apa ki te Rātō, a 32% participation rate and a 99% approval rate. Now, I guess in percentage rates people might think, 20% isn't much, but when you look at the scale of treaty settlements across the board, they range from something like 18% to, at the highest level, from what I can observe, around about 52%. So we can see that the Tauihu claims are somewhere in the middle. We should have a level of confidence that a lot of work has gone into ensuring that the broadest possible net of securing greater participation in the decision-making process has happened. Mandate is a key issue in the treaty settlement discussion, and certainly it became a point of, criticism for those people who didn't support. But we must, in fairness, go to some of the submissions that were put before the Select Committee. I want to ask the House to look at the key amendment that the Select Committee raised, and that was in relation to the Puketāwai site. And one of the things that tasked our minds around getting that particular amendment is that we actually agreed with submitters that they shouldn't be inheriting a liability. So we have amended the bill to insert a new clause 277A to ensure that the liability on that landfill site does not transfer to the new owners. And why that is so important is because previously it was, to my understanding, in the hands of local government, and it's not fully disclosed what level of contamination exists on that site. We sought advice from officials. The Minister certainly heard the plea of the Select Committee to reconsider this particular aspect, and thankfully we were able to achieve an amendment to make it very clear that no liability was to transfer from this closed landfill site. I think that's a gain in terms of the value of the Select Committee and what it contributes to the process. It's also a gain because iwi are much more confident in terms of taking back lands where there may be an undisclosed liability that they don't have to pay for the cost of clean-up. In terms of the Woodburn Airbase, we did, as my colleague Reno Tirikatene has said, we did get a fair amount of, I guess, concern around the return of this land not going back to private landowners. However, we recommended no change to the bill because it's an airbase site. It's a defence site. It will continue to be that. There was no indication, certainly when the Select Committee pursued the interests of people who objected to the clause, there was no indication that the site would not be no longer used for a defence site. So we thought, well, actually, the provision in the bill can stay the same. On Wakatū, because this is another area where the Wakatū Incorporation had put its interests before the Select Committee and said some of the private shareholding interests of its underneath its purview would be significantly affected by terms in the bill. Our mind was tasked around two particular things. Firstly, the cluster of Te Tauhi who claimants actually in the first instance did originally include members that were advocating for Wakatū in some way through the process. If I recollect the discussion, those interests had fallen away from continuing with the negotiation. The second key point was that this is an iwi settlement, this isn't a private shareholder settlement. The fundamental difference is that some of the shareholders of Wakatū are not members of the iwi who will benefit from the settlement. So we kind of teased that out and got ourselves sufficiently comfortable with the fact that the protection or preservation clause of the legal interests that currently exist in the bill actually cover off all the concerns that Wakatū were concerned about. But can I put this on the record, because we wanted to make absolutely sure in terms of that significant submission that we sought advice from both the Office of Treaty Settlements and Crown Law. And I read the advice that we got back from the Crown Law Office for the benefit of those listening and interested in the debate. I quote, "The current orthodox position is that the Treaty of Waitangi does not give rise to directly enforceable legal obligations without specific statutory authority. In the Wakatū proceedings, the claims are based around the same factual grievances that are the subject of the settlement, but primarily raise private law claims based in trust and fiduciary duty, not based on the treaty breach. The ability to prosecute certain private law claims raised in Wakatū may be impacted by extinguishment provisions of the Tainui Taranaki Treaty settlements and their extinguishment clause unless expressly preserved. Crown Law advice was sought on this matter and ultimately it was considered improper to obstruct the final determination in the appellate courts. Legislative drafting was developed to specifically apply a preservation clause only to the current litigation and specific parties to that litigation." And I read that for the benefit of those of Tainui Taranaki, so that they're clear in terms of the way in which the Select Committee approached this issue and actually reconfirmed that the bill should not be changed in this regard. Mr Speaker, this is the second reading, hopefully in the third reading of the bill. Every member of the Māori Affairs Select Committee who I know would want to speak on this will be able to make a contribution and acknowledge the hard work and effort of all those negotiators of Te Tauhi who have brought this bill to the House to be considered. Kia ora.
Mr Speaker.
Denise Roche.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker. Tēnā koutou katoa I te whare. I ngā iwi hui nei, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā